So welcome to video 2 of reading and communicating research. We just got done talking about thinking critically. If you didn't get a chance to watch, make sure you go back because this does build on each other. So make sure you watch part 1 before you jump into this part 2. So we talked a little bit about reading research, but now what about writing and how to write professionally? Now I had some of you do, or I had all of you do the what is EBP assignment. Just a quick writing example on what is evidence-based practice. Give me a little bit of your writing style. Give me a little bit of your writing aptitude. And if you have gotten those back, that's often an assignment that I grade pretty closely. And it's not because I'm trying to be a pain. It's because I want you to start looking in the eyes of being a professional writer. Often through earlier grades, even in through some of the 100, 200 level classes, of your education, your college education. You write to get by. You write because you have to. Now you're going to start getting into the area, and I say now because this is a 290 class. This is about as close to a 300 level as you can get. You're going to start getting into high-level writing, high-level reading, to prepare you for maybe graduate education or prepare you for clinical healthcare work or clinical fitness work or nutrition, whatever you might be going into. So as you write professionally, you really need to make sure that you demonstrate an understanding for the content, which means you're not just taking what somebody says and putting it down on a sheet of paper. You're not staying broad. You're really diving in depth. And I'm not saying when I say dive in depth, I'm not saying that you need to write a 6-page paper if I'm asking for 2 pages. I'm just saying that you need to make sure that you provide good, clear examples, good, clear content, something a little bit more than just surface writing. You need to make sure that you provide a good, clear topic. And if you state your intent, there's nothing wrong with the intent or the purpose of this paper there's nothing wrong with that. That provides a good, clear purpose. You're going to see that in research articles. So as you write professionally, that's good for your writer so they know exactly what they're looking for. You want to make sure that you use appropriate material from appropriate sources. We went through the database searching lesson. So hopefully you got an idea of how to find primary resources, not necessarily secondary, although secondary can be appropriate depending on what work is being done. You need to make sure that you're accurately citing that information. That is something that, especially in that what is EBP assignment, that I do put a lot of comments about. As we get towards your final paper, one of my largest comments that I make on every final paper is citation. You need a citation here. We're missing a citation. Everywhere where we're putting some type of fact or piece of information, we need to make sure that we're accurately citing that. It really enhances the credibility of what we're writing, especially if we're finding that from a book or from another work or something else. So we need to make sure that we're acceptable grammar and language. This is very important to make sure that none of the content is lost. I've mentioned before, I'm not an English instructor, so I'm not going to catch every missed comma or missed semicolon, etc. But you really need to make sure that the content is not lost by using acceptable grammar and language. A technique that I've mentioned in one of the previous videos was speak your paper out loud before you turn them in. This can be a very important concept. I do it all the time and I find mistakes, even if it's just missing an S on the end of a word, or sometimes I'll read things over and think, what on earth was I thinking? I'm doing this video right now at 1 o'clock in the morning. I like to do my work at night. Well, I've had a full day, so I need to make sure that I'm speaking coherently. So that's one way to do that, is to speak it out loud. Make sure that you develop and create an organized focused structure. I know you've all learned how to outline. The easiest writing that I've ever done has been with an outline. And you might think, oh, it's an extra step that I don't want to do. I wrote my dissertation opening pages, which ended up being 40-ish pages, using an outline. And I would have been completely lost without it. It was very easy because I would write about one topic, and then rather than thinking, all right, where do I go now? I had already done that thinking. I had already done my outline where I thought, okay, after this, I want to talk about this. And after this, I want to talk about this, and then this and this and this. I already created that outline in my head and I wrote it down. So it was as simple as I was writing, I got to page 10 of my writing. I just looked over at my outline and said, oh, this is what I'm supposed to write about next, because I've already done that thinking, and now I can just jump in. I can find my articles on that topic and jump into the writing. So I recommend outlining. It doesn't have to be fancy. Now, if you're turning it in, it's a different story. But even if you just jot down notes of first, this is what I want to talk about, then this, that type of outlining can make a big difference. Speak to your intended audience. Who are you speaking to? Are you speaking to doctors or nurses, where you have to use high-level medical terminology? Are you speaking to students? Who are you speaking to? Are you speaking to me, or are you speaking to a colleague? If you're speaking to medical professionals or professors, you don't want to use slang terminology. However, if you're speaking to, coworkers or peers in more of that relaxed setting, that might be appropriate. So just know your intended audience before you write a paper. Make sure you're using your supporting evidence, knowing when to quote and when to paraphrase. If you look at your final paper, I do not allow any quotations. And the reasons why I don't allow any quotations is because I want writing that is based on your ideas, your interpretations. I can read the articles and find what the authors say, but it's difficult to use quotations appropriately. We often will quote an entire sentence or 2 sentences or 3 sentences rather than just the 4 or 5 words that actually mean something to what we're talking about. Ideally, we would quote when we specifically need to, when we feel that it's absolutely vital, that we can't say it any better than the authors. However, that's not often the case. We all often do it incorrectly. Other people's information. We don't want to borrow their information and pass it off as our own. That would be some type of plagiarism. We don't want to let somebody else write our paper. We want to make sure that we are writing it. If you do use quotations in future papers, keep them short. The shorter, the better. Make them clear, make them concise, but do also make them fit. I've had students in the past that will fit in a quotation in different classes or other papers, and the quotation doesn't really make sense to what they're trying to say. So make sure the quotation fits with the content. So for our final project paper, I don't want you using any quotations. I want everything paraphrased, everything in your own words. When we talk about note cards, I'll have a little video about note cards that we're going to do through Noodle Tools. I'm going to help you do that and help you paraphrase. So it's one thing that I try not to use quotations in my paper because I don't like this. I don't like to have somebody else write my papers. And that's something that I recommend and make sure that we learn how to do that. Last thing here is on presenting. When we present in any, make sure that we're presenting in our organized, focused topic. Just like when we're writing, we want to develop that topic. We want to do the same thing here if we're presenting. We really want to spend the first part of my presentation outlining my purpose. This is what I will be talking about in better words, but we really want to come up with those main points. But using conversational delivery rather than necessarily a professional presentation style can often help. We never want to read directly from as limited notes as possible. We want to make sure that we understand the content. Basically, the thing I say a lot is if you can't pronounce it, don't use it in the presentation. So that helps us with our if we're presenting, if we're giving any type of oral presentations, we're not going to be in this online context, but it does help you out a little bit if you're going to be presenting in the future, just to try to make sure that you've got a good, well-developed topic and go from there. That's all for part 2. Again, make sure if you didn't watch part 1, make sure you get back to part 1 as well.